All right, Impact Queens, welcome back to another episode of Position to Impact podcast. I'm so glad you're here. All right, so today we are talking about the impact of branding. Branding, and branding. Oh my. We have all heard what branding is. We have all heard many different definitions of branding. May have heard of branding as in colors and fonts and images and photo shoots. Or you may have heard branding as building a brand business around a person, place, or product. This is also branding, as in your messaging or your way of life on building a platform around a particular message or a particular type of lifestyle, right? So, on this episode, myself as well as Andrea Jones, we are going to be talking about the impact you can create with all three and why branding is so important in starting, growing, and scaling a platform and or a business. So, Andrea Jones is fiercely committed to helping businesses and podcasters build profitable communities online through simple social media solutions. She has been featured in places like HubSpot, Aweber, and WordPress. She's also named one of Social Report's top marketers to follow in 2019. As the host of the Savvy Social podcast and the creator of SavvySocialSchool.com, Andrea is dedicated to simplifying social media through easy to follow courses, professional guidance, and community support. Outside of teaching and training, she spends most of her time serving her full service clients and practicing what she preaches by implementing organic social media strategies for businesses and brands that want to grow and engage audience online. Just for you, for listening to today's episode, you get an exclusive freebie from her. Make sure you go to theimpactmentor.com/podcast so that you can get your hands on it. All right, let's get started.
You are now listening to the Position to Impact podcast with your host, the Impact Mentor, Alicia Ford. The podcast designed to inspire innovation and imagination that sparks change, conversation, and the desire to impact other people's lives. Whether you are a top-notch leader in your community or a savvy business owner on the go, this podcast is for you. Are you ready to build your legacy and impact the world? Then get ready, Impactors, to listen to today's inspiring message. It's time to position your impact in 4, 3, 2, 1.
Okay, everybody, welcome to this episode. I'm super excited. I have a very special guest with us today. I have been following her for probably like almost a year now on Instagram. And it was one of those things where I really wanted to interact with her. And I had a podcast, she has a podcast, and I was like, let me just ask. You never know until you ask, right? And so I crept into her DM and I was like, hey, I got a podcast. Would you be interested? And she was like, oh my gosh, yes, I would. Here's my email address. And so let me please introduce you to Miss Andrea Jones. Hello, Miss Jones. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm so happy to be here. Always love a good social media connection. So yes, love it, love it, love it.
And it's crazy. I love how you said that because it's becoming more and more common and becoming more and more comfortable for people to do it, where I can remember when it was a little scary to reach out to somebody that you didn't know, because you didn't know if they thought you were a creeper or a scammer or they were trying to steal your identity or whatever. But now it's just like, oh, I have all these friends and I've never met them in person.
Yes. Have you seen the meme where they're talking about, back when we were growing up, it was like, don't talk to strangers. And now it's like, post your whole life online for strangers. So,
exactly. Your entire life.
Yeah.
Yeah. So today's topic, everybody, is what we're talking is the impact of branding. And so, but before we get into that, Miss Andrea, I asked every single one of my guests, what is their definition of impact?
Yes. So I think it's something that is hard to see, But for me, impact is when you leave such an impression on someone that they then share it with someone else. So a ripple effect, if you will, or a butterfly effect, where your impact, it's hard to see just in that individual person, but you can see it in the way that they share your message with other people.
I love how you said a ripple effect and how it's not just the one person. I think it's oh my gosh, we see it all the time. Like they used to make these back in the day where they would make these Good Samaritan like commercials. And it would always be like, oh, here's one person and they smile at this person. Well, because that person smiled at them, they decide to hold the door for somebody else. And then because they hold the door for somebody else, someone decided to help somebody else pick up all their groceries that just fell out the bottom of the bag or something like that. So, and it's like, pass it on type of thing. So,
yeah, for sure.
So I definitely love that your viewpoint behind impact. So jumping into the topic. So tell me, what's your definition of branding? What does branding look like, feel like, smell like, all of that great stuff?
Yeah. Branding's a tough one because there is an visual side of branding and then there's an emotional side of branding. So when we're looking at, when I'm looking at approaching my brands, I start with the emotional side first. So what do I want people to feel, think, imagine when they experience this business or this brand? And then the visuals will kind of come from that. But as a viewer, you are looking at the visuals first and getting the experience, the emotion behind it second. So it's kind of like two-sided. As a brand, you want to think about the emotions first and then visual second. And then as a user, that's, thinking about how the user experiences it with the visuals first. And then those visuals evoke some sort of feeling in someone.
So since, you have a great social media platform, and how does branding, why is branding so important when it comes to social media?
We're all looking at so many different social media posts. I mean, hundreds to thousands of them every single day.
Yeah.
But there's something about certain brands. Like for me, when I see a Chipotle post, before I even know it's Chipotle, I can see that it's a Chipotle post because I love Chipotle. And they have a brand that's very distinct. And so you want to have that with your own brand, even if it's a personal brand, where if someone sees your post, they recognize it. They feel connected to it. They don't feel like they're looking at something they've never seen before. They feel some sort of affinity with that thing. And so that helps when it's in a social media feed because it makes people stop and appreciate it. Now, when you're first getting to know someone, the branding is not so important. It's really kind of like your presentation. Like if you're going on a date, for instance, getting dressed up for the date, you want to look nice and that sort of thing. But on a deeper level with your ongoing fans, it's like branding is something like getting to know someone on that date. So what are they talking about? What kind of conversations are they having? What do you like about them? What do you don't like about them? How do you feel when you're around them? And so if you kind of position your ideas about branding similarly to dating, I think that will take things to a whole nother level. And it's really more about that long-term relationship with someone versus that first impression.
So many great analogies kind of came, especially when you linked it to dating. And one of the things that I talk about with clients and I help people with is, as I always say, we all have a divine mission and message. And when you have a message or you feel like you have something that you need to say, I know you mentioned earlier about there's kind of a dual part to branding where one is visual and the other one is a feeling. Mm-hmm. I think you're right when it comes to, we are visual creatures sometimes. And sometimes it does take for you to make a good impression, like you said, visually, before I can see and hear whatever it is that you're selling or offering. So if you think about, you're going on a date, like you said, and the person shows up and they haven't dressed nice, or they haven't dressed for the location that y'all are meeting up at. You can tell they're sweaty. You can tell they haven't combed their hair. Like, you're less likely to actually acknowledge that this might be a really great person because of the first impression that they gave you.
Mm-hmm, absolutely. And, well, maybe I should ask you this, because you said you've been following me on Instagram for a year. If I can put you on the spot a little bit. I mean, what, like, when you look for people on Instagram and you decide to follow them, from your perspective, what are some of the things that you look for?
Oh my gosh, I love that you said that. Okay. So there's a couple things. Let me back up, because I think I'm looking for relatability. Mm-hmm. I'm looking for someone who I see myself in currently, or who I aspire to be. And especially at the stage that I'm at. I'm trying to think, look, now you have me pulling out my Instagram. So I'm trying to think who I actually really, really, truly follow, because I actually follow a lot of YouTubers as well. So the only reason why I follow them on Instagram is because I follow them actually on YouTube. Mm-hmm. But people who I actually follow because I found them on Instagram is not that many. You are one of them. And I would say what attracted me to you was you were a Black woman, let's just say that. Mm-hmm. And I'm always interested to seeing what we're doing. I love to know what we're talking about, how we're speaking. And then the other thing was your voice. It's so welcoming and warm, and it was inviting. So because of your voice, it prompted me to want to listen to what you had to say. And then then the branding comes in, because now you're aesthetically pleasing behind you, because when you are doing your videos that are on your Insta stories, I mean, you're angling the camera a certain way. So, I mean, it looks like we're FaceTiming or something like that. You make it seem like you're not talking at me. Mm. And I think that's important too. So that's what kind of catches me as well. But any just major brands that I follow, I think it equates to what you said. You found them off social media for some other reason, and then you like them off of social media or off of that platform, and then you just follow them. And so anytime now when I go on Instagram, I see people who I look at their stories before I look at anybody else's stories, because I want to know what's going on. And it's oh, what is she talking about today? So I'll immediately go to yours, and there's another person that I follow. Her name is Chanel, and so I'll go to her stuff too, and I'll watch and I'll listen and I'll learn something, and it just puts me in a good mood.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I totally relate to that too. Finding more people who kind of look like you and are successful in the online space. One person that comes to mind for me is Jerisha Hawk. You go look at her Instagram and her stories. I found her on Instagram, and now I follow everything that she does, because I admire her. And it's kind of like what you said. You look at someone and you go, either this is a reflection of where I am now, or it's a reflection of where I want to be. So yeah, social media is such a powerful way to do that. And then the branding of it all, it really just ties everything together.
So let me ask you, who would you say, I'm going to be naughty, is there a brand right now, we're going to call a faceless brand. So for those who, faceless brand being the brand is not a person. So is there a faceless brand that you follow? I know you just mentioned Chipotle, but is there another brand that you're just I love everything about this page. I love everything that you're saying. And if that's the case, then why? What attracted you to that particular brand?
Oh, that's a good question. I do have a few. I don't necessarily follow them, but I always check in on them. One of them, a little random, but Poopery. You know what Poopery is?
Oh, yeah, I know what that is.
You spray it in your bowl before you go? Okay, yes. Poopery. they're so cheeky with their social media that I have it bookmarked. And then sometimes if I need inspiration, I'll go look at what they're doing on social media. Now, I think that's a little bit of a gray area because they do have a person who is representing their brand still, even though they're a faceless brand. So I'm trying to think of one that's non-faceless, and I'm trying to blank, but yeah, they're one of them where I will go check and see what they're doing because they're always doing something new and innovative and exciting, and they totally get that their brand, like their product, is a little weird, and they make fun of themselves. And I think, that playfulness is something that is a really good thing to have in a brand like theirs.
I agree. Yeah, I didn't even think to, went on Instagram while she was talking to try to go find them so I could follow them as well. But yeah, so can you see, and I'm just looking at the clock there, but we can get it in before our first break. How do you think branding comes off of social media?
Oh, that's a good question. I think it's something that, for a personal brand, it's something that people experience when they're with you. So I've seen this before sometimes too, where someone has a big personality on social media, and then in real life, it's kind of like wah wah. I'm a fan of a lot of YouTubers as well. I've been to YouTubing conferences and experienced that. And so I think part of it is, with the power of social media, you can amplify your brand, yes, of course. But when we're taking it offline, your brand still has to show up and be represented. If you are one of those faceless brands, I actually think you'll have a lot easier job doing this. So if you're like a brick and mortar business, for instance, or you are just like a digital business that's faceless, I think you just have a lot easier time kind of communicating your brand both online and offline. It's a personality brand, so it gets a little challenging.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we're going to take a quick break real quick for one of our sponsors. So today's sponsor is sponsored by me. So we are offering everyone today the opportunity to get their hands on the Ultimate Impact Blueprint. So for those who don't know, I am a content strategist and an online course builder. I am on a personal mission to impact as many women as I can to help build a brand with God around their divine purpose. Basically, you can build your own library of digital products from your gifts, talent, skills, and expertise. When it comes to building a brand, there are only 5 components that you really need to be visible online, align your divine messages with your content, create content that attracts, and build a speaking platform that truly impacts. Plus, you will also learn in this blueprint the number one thing that new entrepreneurs or new brands, as well as some of the veterans, skip when it comes to growing a brand. I want you to understand that back in 2015, I made the decision that I was not going to let the lack of money stop me from seeking coaching, advice, tools, resources. If it required I paid for it, I would just figure it out. I was hoping and praying for an opportunity to just fall in my lap that helped me and supported me. Since that promise, I have had the money to pay for VAs, graphic designers, one-on-one coaching, group coaching. Why am I telling you this? It's because it always starts with the decision to change and be different. For me, it was making the decision to not let my lack of resources stop me from growing my brand and my business. For you, it could be making the decision to just start, making the decision to try, making the decision to send the emails, making the decision to find people that can really help you and support you in your entrepreneurial journey. I prayed for a way and I said I was open to the how. So what are you waiting for? Inside of you is a divine brand and a message that needs to be shared. Building your brand from the inside out. It is time for you to start attracting the clients and the customers that you need to grow your brand. So how do you get your hands on the Ultimate Impact Blueprint? First of all, you can click the link that's in the show notes right now. That will take you right on over there. We are doing a flash sale where every course that you see is 50% off. Yes, I said 50% off, girl. 50% off. You can click the link in the show notes right now, or you can go to the impactshop.thinkforkit.com, the impactshop.thinkforkit.com, the impactshop.thinkifc.com. Okay, and we're back. And so we've been having a fantastic conversation about branding, but I'm going to switch gears a little bit. And I want everybody to kind of think about branding. We're talking about branding, but really branding is more like the umbrella. And Andrea mentioned it earlier in the beginning of the episode where she talked about there's the visual and then there's the feeling. And I am the type of person who, like, how I work with my clients is I say branding, but I'm not talking about the visual pieces. I'm talking about what is your actual business and what's your message, what's your gifts, what's your talents, and how do you want to structure a brand or a business around that. And so when you think about branding as an umbrella, and then there's other pieces that fall in line. One of those things is messaging. And what is your messaging? What are you talking about? This word is a buzzword, but I mean, there's really no other word of saying it, but content, right? And I know some people are like, they're sick of that word, but it's a word that's not going to go away because content is anything. Content is everything. It's in between. It's content that you put on, that you curate for Instagram. It's content that you create for YouTube, but it's also content that you actually, if you're working with clients, the content that you're giving your one-on-one clients or creating digital products, that's considered content, what you're actually creating. And I'll share this quick story. When I first started my business in 2015, I was trying to do the life coaching route. And I, of course, was trying, I was coming across gurus and experts and leaders that were selling their courses, their packages, their one-on-one sessions. But what I was finding was that they were trying to make me into them. And it was very cookie cutter. And so really the vibe that they were giving off was that the only way you're going to make money online is if you are a marketeer or you are a business coach. And it's funny because in a way, I'm kind of a business coach, but I don't put the marketing to what I do. Because when I switched over, it was really me being mad because it was me being upset because I was like, what if I want to be a health coach? Or what if I want to be a life coach that helps people with confidence? What if I want to be someone who's helping them? I used to be I'm a licensed counselor, but I want to be able to support people on online space. But you're telling me that the only way that I can do anything is to be this particular type of coach. And that just made me angry. And I was like, no, stop creating a business and you're just marketing. But what are you marketing? Like, what are you talking about? And so that's where, for me, I started to transition into messaging. And I started helping people like, no, let's hone in on what you really want to say, what you really want to help people with, and build your foundation or build your programs, your products, your content around those things. So let me ask you, Andrea, have you come across this same thing? And how important is messaging when it comes to branding?
Yeah, I have had the similar experience. So most of what I do is in social media, and there's so many conflicting pieces of advice out there on what you should be doing on social media, what you shouldn't be doing on social media, what works and what doesn't. And I think that oftentimes people are, it may come from a good place, they're sharing their experience. But I think there is a difference between sharing your experience and saying, this is the only way things can be done. And so actually, Tara McMullen, who I follow, she's the host of the What Works podcast. She has the What Works Network community. It's a great community. And she really focuses in on what works for her and having other members share what works for them. So it's just kind of in her branding, if we're going to use that as an example, her message isn't, this is the only way. Her message is, here are some stories from actual business owners on what has worked for them. Take from it what you find useful, leave what you don't, kind of thing. And so messaging is so powerful because the way that we present ourselves online, especially if you're a personal brand, can have an impact on people. And especially in such a way that, based on both of our experiences, we don't want to have that message that's like, this is the only way to do something. It's really more important to find the way that works for you, the way that gets results for you. And sometimes we joke with people about, in the digital marketing space, take like the big guys, if they were to start today, would they be as successful? I think it's a different landscape right now. Yeah. We were talking offline before how I used to make YouTube videos. If I had kept doing that and I had some sort of direction to it, I could be teaching people how to do YouTube videos today. But I think some of those people, part of the magic was they were starting at a really good time for it. I'm not saying that you can't start now. It's just a totally different strategy.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's funny that you said that, because I also, Chalene Johnson, if you're in the podcasting world, then you know who Chalene Johnson is. And if you're in the workout world and health world, then you know who Chalene Johnson is. And Chalene has multiple podcasts. Multiple. I think she has like 3 or 4 podcasts. But she tells the story that she gets so many people to ask her, how do you start a podcast? What do I need to do? And she says, I can't tell you what to do because the things that I did to start mine isn't relevant anymore. If I told you what I did to build my podcast, it wouldn't work today. She says, right now I'm able to maintain what I have because of what I've already built, and I already have a following. And I think you were right when you said, like, every platform changes, and I'm an observer. Like, I look at, I love on YouTube, Tia Mowry's Quick Fix. And she started her YouTube channel a year ago. Well, like a little over a year ago, because she started making videos and we didn't know she was pregnant yet. And now the baby is 1 year old now. So it's almost 2 years since she started that YouTube channel. But I can remember her making comments in the first year of her wanting to hit 1 million subscribers within that first year. And now here we are, it's almost 2 years. And even her being Tia Mowry, people know her from Sister. She's a twin. She still hasn't hit 1 million subscribers yet on YouTube. Mm-hmm. But 6 months ago, she hit 1 million subscribers for Tia Mowry's Quick Fix on Facebook. So I think that's another thing to take into consideration when it comes to branding. Each platform is different because each platform has a different type of consumer. And so you may, just because, you choose Instagram to be your primary place that you distribute content or you show up more frequently, understand that even if you're going to repurpose content to YouTube or repurpose it to Facebook, you still have to curate it in a way so that the consumer of Facebook will absorb it. Mm-hmm. So messaging, I think, is a big part of that as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So what are some other ways what are some other things under that branding umbrella that falls under besides messaging?
Yeah, so I think messaging is a huge part of it, because we did talk about the emotional aspect. And part of the messaging thing isn't so much sharing what you do. And I think we get stuck into that a little bit. We go, oh, I'm a social media manager. Here's how I help people.
Mm-hmm.
Sure. I think part of it, the messaging is really, instead of sharing what you do, figuring out ways to connect with someone. So business owners, for instance, I talk a lot about business on my platforms because businesses need social media and I want to find a way to connect with them.
Mm-hmm.
But outside of messaging, I mean, it's the emotional and the visual aspect. So just making sure that the two kind of are intertwined and there's a good balance of both things. You don't want to have too much of either one because it does have to be a good balance. But I think those are the two main pillars that hold up that branding umbrella.
Awesome. So what do you feel like are some, so let's say someone's listening right now and they're like, okay, I get it, Alicia. I get it, Andrea, messaging and visuals and emotions and connections. Where do I start?
So I think a really good place to start with all of this is to just do like a brain dump. And there's no right answer, there's no wrong answer. It's really just putting it on paper. And I like to start with the emotional aspect. So sit down with a piece of paper and write out how you want people to feel when they interact with your brand. And I really liked what you said earlier about really sharing like your purpose in life. And so it's like, once you understand that, and once you kind of start thinking about that, you may be surprised by some of the things that come up. So, for instance, if you're going to sit down and talk about messaging, I'll use a random example. Let's say you're a yoga instructor and you're like, I want to start, filling up my classes and I want to use social media and my message to do that. Well, start thinking about how you want people to feel when they leave your class. Okay. So how should their life be different when they experience your service, what you do? And I think once you start doing that, that'll really frame what your messaging is like. So if you want people to feel relaxed, rejuvenated, if you want people to feel like accomplished, if you want them to feel powerful, like they can really conquer their day, I think all of those things are very important to illustrating that message online. So you could just say, I've got a yoga class, come join up. But now you're saying, here's my class. Afterwards, you will feel all of these things. I think that's a much more powerful way to connect with people. And then when you're creating the visuals to go with that, let's say you want to take an image of yourself in a yoga pose. Now you're thinking about those words before you even take the picture. So if it's relaxed, now you're taking an image of yourself looking relaxed. Or if it's powerful, maybe one of your students is doing a really great power pose, warrior pose, or I like the tree one, but I can never remember the name. I think it's just called tree pose.
Maybe, yeah.
Yeah. So if someone's doing what some of those poses, that relates to your messaging. And so now you can really marry those two ideas on your website when you're talking to other people on social media. And that essence of your brand came from that brainstorming session of how you want people to feel when they experience what you do.
That's wonderful. One thing that came to mind was understanding yourself. That's what popped up as you were talking. And I think that's important. It can be very scary when you're starting a brand and guys, we're not just talking about, or ladies, we're not just talking about business. So like, whether it's brick and mortar, whether it's online business, we're not just talking about business. There are so many people out here who just want to be an influencer. They just want to create an impact. They want to say something. They want to have a message that just shapes, like she said, someone's day, that they have a better outcome on life every single day. And then maybe later the business stuff comes up because as you're growing your influence and you're growing in followers, then other people want to start collaborating with you. They want to start marketing with you because of the platform and the work that you put into it. So this isn't just for businesses, but I think I always start with understanding yourself in reference to what do you feel like your gifts and talents are? What do you feel like your skill set, you know, is? And literally going back and looking at all the old jobs you used to do. There's actually an exercise that I do with clients where it's like, okay, we're going to make a work timeline. Every job that you've ever had, I want you to write it down. And then I want you to tell me what's at least 4 or 5 things that you had to do in that job. And that exercise is designed to remind you that you've picked up skills along the way. And it reminds you of, wow, man, I do know how to do like a lot of stuff. Like I do have some skills. I do have some gifts. And a lot of times we look at skills and gifts and talents as, comedic or makeup artistry or whatever. We think sometimes it always has to be something that makes you famous. But that's not always true, because you can always merge your gift and your talent with your message. And I talk about finding the right platform that will allow you to showcase your best self. You mentioned earlier about YouTubers. Sometimes like you see them one way, they have their brand and they're able to kind of fluff up their brand. But then when you meet them in person, it's kind of lackluster. And I just see that as they found the platform that showcases them at their highest. So when you're seeing somebody at their best, like you're literally looking at someone performing at their highest peak. Everyone cannot maintain that all day, every day. But I think there is a happy medium, because you don't want your brand to come off as like, oh, if you don't want to come off as fake. Mm-hmm. So it's like, oh, you're one way on social media, but then you're a completely different person on this way. So it is a happy medium. But I think, again, that goes back to understanding yourself. So I think like under that branding umbrella is your messaging, your story, understanding yourself, what you said, like knowing what you want, how you want people to feel, creating that emotional connection.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah. Agree with everything you said. Love it. And I think I want to go back and do that exercise for myself, like retroactively, and look at what jobs I've had and how I've taken those skills into the business that I have today. I really like that exercise.
Yeah, it's a fun exercise. I do it every once in a while, because I usually have them do two timelines. So we do the work timeline, but then I also have them do a timeline of their life. And what I'm looking for in that are stories. Because a lot of times people get on here, again, content strategists. So I'm like, people tell me like, oh, I don't know what to say. Like I keep saying the same thing over and over and over again. And that gets boring. And so then they start going away from what they originally wanted to say, because they feel like they've said it already. And so by creating your life timeline where you could talk about, well, at this time, I was bullied. At this time, I got my first car and I remember crashing it. Or you remember when you got a scholarship and you had to go, you had to do all these steps to get the scholarship. And you were like one out of 500 people who were awarded that scholarship, and what that felt like. So being able to map all of that out allows you to create stories. And all that does is allows you to see how great you are. And it allows you to see what you are bringing to the table, because it can be scary when you're entering this arena where you have so many other people who sound like they know what they're talking about, and they sound like the expert and they sound like gurus, and you're new. Mm-hmm. And so just because you don't know about the online arena doesn't mean you don't know about anything. Mm-hmm. So those who exercises in itself just help them solidify that you are bringing something to the table. You're just new in how we're packaging it. Mm-hmm. And that's okay. It's okay to be new, but you're not coming with nothing.
Yeah. Oh, that's so powerful. I love that. love that.
So I know offline you mentioned DMs. So I wanted to remind you about that. So how important is like what is DMing and why is that important with branding?
Yeah. Well, I mean, honestly, we're here because of a DM. So let's just get that clear. Yes, facts. It works. It works. But some of the things that are really powerful right now are if you could take your personality, your branding, and into the direct messaging space. There's something about feeling like you're texting someone that takes things to another level. That you can still have the same messaging, the same stories. I mentioned the yoga instructor example. If that's the path that you're on, you can still have those same feelings of either relaxation or power or some of those things. But you can use direct message as a means to do that. And one of my favorite ways to do this lately is through voice messages on Instagram, or even video if you're feeling super brave, if you got your lipstick on. But those voice or video messages go so much farther than anything else you can do. So let's say you created a post and you have your story in there, you have your messaging, you have your call to action, and someone leaves a comment on that post. A great way to follow up with them is to send them a direct message, a personalized one. The key here is personalized, because you don't want to like spam a bunch of people the same message. It's kind of gross. But if you do that voicemail, just to be like, hey, I was thinking of you, or hey, do you have any questions about XYZ? I think that is such a powerful way to bring your brand to someone one-to-one. And then you kind of are breaking down the barriers of the challenges of social media right now, which are, it kind of feels a little broadcasty, kind of feels a little bit like, oh, do I even matter? Like, I'll just double tap this and move on. Like, you're breaking down some of those like barriers that make us feel a little bit like we're just in the masses, and you're connecting with someone on an individual level, which is still the most powerful way to connect with someone. So if you can bring your brand into that scenario, I just see so much good things happening there. Things like being on someone else's podcast.
Exactly. Well, Andrea, I appreciate you so much for taking the time to come and play with me here on Position to Impact Podcast. And if you could leave something for everybody, like just sum it all up, what would you say?
I think sometimes we want things to be perfect before we get started. And we talked a lot about the different elements of branding. But if you could just take one piece of that branding umbrella and get started today, I think that'll help you figure out the rest. So you don't have to have it completely 100% perfect before you start. Just take one piece from today's episode and start working on that. And I think, you can start adding in the other pieces later, but I think that's a really, really good way to start.
Thank you. That's great. And I would concur with everything she said. It just takes one piece at a time. If I could piggyback, I would say focus on your messaging. Focus on the feeling first. I feel like sometimes we do get caught up in the visual aspects first, and because we want to make that great first impression. But I think it's easier to catch people's visual eye on the second impression if what you're saying is good, versus you catch me with the visual, but what you're saying is there's no substance. You've lost me forever. So that's what I would say. Good. All right. Well, Miss Andrea has a great freebie for you guys. Make sure you go to www.theimpactmentor.com/podcast so that you can get your hands on it now. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. Okay, Impact Queens, I hope that you enjoyed this episode. I really enjoyed engaging with our guests today, and I hope you got some really great tips and tools and tricks that you can use in your social media, and that you have a better understanding of what branding is. Please, to get all the tools and resources and everything that we mentioned in today's episode, please go to theimpactmentor.com/podcast so that you can get your hands on the freebie that Andrea is offering. Also, please make sure that you follow her on her social media. You can find her at onlinedrea.com as well as at onlinedrea at Instagram. All right. So until the next episode, see you later, Impact Queens.